The New York Knicks get blown out in game 4. The other shoe finally dropped. All the injuries, all the minutes, ultimately caught up to the Knicks. Can they respond? We're going to talk about it now.
You are Locked On Knicks, your daily New York Knicks podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Oh boy, that was not a lot of fun. I apologize for the late start this morning as we're getting this one up on Monday morning, and I think you guys could probably empathize. I needed about 15 hours there to process my emotions, to contemplate even doing a podcast on this one, because this was one of the more dispiriting games I've ever covered. And as Alex and I often reference on this podcast, we got to see the rise and fall of the Alonzo Trier era. So that is really, really saying something. But I've calmed down a little bit. I've settled in. As I've seen a lot of people saying, no matter how bad it was, it still only counts as one loss. My fear, I'm sure just like the fear of all those people, is what does this loss suggest, or in the case of the Knicks, forebode in future games? We're going to get into all that in just a sec. But first, I want to tell you that this episode is brought to you by PrizePicks, the easiest and most exciting way to play daily fantasy sports. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNBA and use code all lowercase LockedOnNBA for first deposit match up to $100. And I wanted to thank you for making Locked On Knicks your first listen today and every day, because we are now available on all platforms. So please go check us out on YouTube. You might already be checking us out on YouTube. If you are, hit that subscribe button, hit that notifications bell. Even if you already watched this on the podcast side, just have it playing on mute. It's a lot of fun, I promise you. But if you are a PCast loyalist, I get that. Be sure to hit that auto download function so you can take us on the go and keep up with us every single day and have us ready for you in your pod feed of choice. But who's talking to you? Who's shilling for subs? I'm Gavin Schall, your favorite play-by-play broadcaster's favorite play-by-play broadcaster, in the midst of wrapping up high school lacrosse season. Little program announcement. Alex is on vacation, so we're going to have a fun co-host this week. It's going to be XJ from the Hot Hand Theory podcast. Every single time we have him on, the comments are flooded with how much people enjoy his work. So I figured, hey, why not just get him for the full week? Super duper excited for that. Going to be a fun week of talking Knicks, even if it is not a fun week for the New York Knicks. So you might have noticed this is just about the longest intro I've ever done, and that is because I have been trying to delay the inevitable. That is talking about this game for the Knicks. I intentionally did not put the final score in the graphic because I didn't want to scar any children who might have wandered by the screen, but it was 121-89. The Pacers beat the Knicks, and that is honestly not even close to as bad as it could have been. Indiana could have named their score in this one. They could have won by 50 points. For the second straight game, the Knicks got off to a disastrously slow start. Last game, they were down, I think, also 14-4, and then eventually 20-8. And of course, from there, the Knicks battled. They made it a game. It was probably one with slightly better officiating and a lack of a miracle shot from Andrew Nembhard, and yes, better execution down the stretch. The Knicks ultimately could have won, and now is looking like it might have been the game that swung the series in favor of the Indiana Pacers, as the Knicks looked hopeless in this one. I mentioned down 14-4, and then Miles Turner hits what can only be described as another Nembhardian-esque miracle three to beat a shot clock buzzer, making it 17-6. It was 22-8 Pacers win. Jericho Sims gets an 8-second violation, and as Fred Katz highlighted in his excellent recap over on The Athletic, Jalen Brunson was not really looking to go get the ball from Jericho Sims. Deuce McBride was halfway up the court, just kind of thinking, all right, someone else will do it. And to me, that play was also a microcosm of the Knicks' issues on the night. This team that has so often, sometimes even to a fault, where they compete with themselves for rebounds, taken down themselves and said, hey, we are going to lose tonight if I don't play with 150% effort, if I don't kill myself, if I don't give every ounce of energy I have left in my body, we're going to lose. I am putting it on myself. And the premise of this Knicks team is that every single player has that mentality. Every single team, every single guy on this team, much like a TJ McConnell, plays to the point of exhaustion, night in and night out. And tonight, no one wanted to take that on. No one No one wanted that responsibility. No one was prepared for that responsibility. And in turn, a team that was down 4 rotation players, as Jonathan Macri noted in his newsletter this morning, this was a crazy stat. They have a larger portion of their payroll in street clothes, $83 million, than in uniform, $76 million. They're 4 of their 5 highest paid players are currently out. So no one wanted responsibility, and the guys who were there just didn't have that responsibility to give, didn't have that energy to give. It only got worse after that start. They were down 34-11, then 47-19, then 55-27, and then eventually at halftime 69-41, which was the second largest playoff deficit the Knicks have ever faced in the history of their franchise. It was 80-45 with 7:49 to go in the third quarter, and then 92-55 with 3:55 left in the third. And yet somehow at that point, Jalen Brunson and Dante DiVincenzo were still in the game. Brunson eventually sat with 1:59 to go in the third. Dante DiVincenzo eventually sat with 44 seconds to go in the third. Maybe this was an effort by Tom Thibodeau to maintain their conditioning. I would need to ask someone who's a little bit more familiar than I am with how quickly your conditioning falls off, because that seems like a faulty premise to me, and I'm really confused why Brunson, Harden, DiVincenzo played more than, I don't know. Maybe it took you 2 minutes into the third quarter to see the Knicks were not about to put together one of the great comebacks in the history of NBA basketball. It was a disastrous night for all 3 of them as they combined to shoot 10 for 36 from the field, 2 for 15 in the first half. Didn't even really get off enough shots. Jalen Brunson, who I think at this point down OG Anunoby, you are probably, I'm not even going to say probably, you're going to need 35 plus points from Jalen Brunson. You're probably going to need 40 points from him to win this series. You might need one game where he scores like 50, and he is just not capable of giving you that, particularly with Pascal Siakam starting another game in the Pacers, shamelessly providing a lot of help. Brunson, as he's wont to do sometimes when the team is struggling, like getting a little bit of tunnel vision. Not that there are great outlets, not that there are a bunch of other guys hitting shots, but he is not consistently looking to find shooters right now. He's not looking to give Pascal Siakam a chance from behind the arc, which, you know what, in a playoff series or even in the regular season, I can't really blame him, because Pascal Siakam is a generally terrible shooter of the basketball, even when he's wide open. Maybe the single most concerning stat to come out of this one came from Brian Windhorst via Second Spectrum. Jalen Brunson in this basketball game jumping 2.5 inches shorter than average on his jump shot. I actually thought he was, even though he obviously played better in game 4, if only slightly, I actually thought he was maybe moving a little bit better, an inch better in this game. He was not jumping better. That tells you he's clearly still bothered, on top of the right foot injury. Aaron Nesmith also undercut him on a 3-pointer. Of course, that was not called, and he turned his left ankle in this game and was limping up the court a bit. So it was not Brunson's day at all. He missed, I counted 3 like jumpers that I would term wide open. Jalen Brunson is generally pretty automatic on those types of shots. He missed all 3 of them. I believe he missed all 3 of them short in getting off to an 0 for 5 start in the first quarter. Didn't get his first field goal until 30 seconds into the second quarter. And I think the Knicks, on top of the fact that he just didn't have it today, they went away from some of the stuff that worked from last game, and especially the guard-to-guard screens, that even when he clearly couldn't move those actions, just because Jalen is drawing so much attention from opposing defenses, generally can generate open shots for Dante DiVincenzo and Alec Burks. Maybe I missed it early. I was kind of glazed over by just how bad the Knicks were at the start of this game. But they were not finding a way to generate anything easy on offense. Look, give Indiana. I know we're reticent as a fan base to give the Pacers credit here, and we're kind of just generally disgusted with the Pacers. They are a little front runny, as is every team in the NBA, to be fair. They were extraordinarily good in this game. I mean, just look at and this is also a terrible indictment on the Knicks defense, but the shooting for the Pacers starting 5, Siakam was 7 for 9. Aaron Nesmith was 4 for 8, but he didn't miss 2-pointers, 4 for 4 from 2. Miles Turner, 5 for 5, 3 for 3 from 3. Andrew Nemhard, 4 for 5, 1 for 2. Tyrese Halliburton, 8 for 15, 4 for 10 from distance, 26 and 5 in only 28 minutes. And they played incredible defense. And as much as the Knicks were tired and at their wits' end and just did not have anything to give yesterday afternoon, Indiana, they took advantage of every inch of it. So I want to continue talking about where the Knicks were faulty on defense. And before we even get into that, like does any of this conversation ultimately matter? Do the Knicks have enough in them to battle back and make this a series? We're going to talk about all that and much more next on Locked On Knicks. But first, you might be at home asking, hey, what's PrizePicks? Well, I am going to tell you what PrizePicks is. It is America's #1 fantasy sports app with more than 3 million members. It is the easiest and most exciting way to get in on the action while you watch your favorite sports and players. You can pick more or less on 2 to 6 players and watch the winnings roll in. So get in on the playoff action and win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks as you and the world's best players take the game to a new level during basketball's postseason. You can now win up to 100 times your money on PrizePicks with as little as 4 correct picks. You can now turn $10 into $1,000 with basketball, hockey, and more entries today on PrizePicks, America's #1 fantasy sports app. PrizePicks has something for every sports fan, for basketball to hockey to League of Legends and everything in between. You can pick LeBron, Caitlin Clark, Connor McDavid, and Jude Bellingham all in the same entry. PrizePicks is the best way to get in the action on sports in more than 30 states across the country, including California, Texas, and Georgia. You can download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNBA for a first deposit match up to $100. PrizePicks, pick more, pick less. It's that easy. All right, guys. So I wanted to. So here's the thing. This should not be shocking. What happened yesterday? It sucks. It's brutal. It is shocking because this team has stepped up so many times when we didn't think it was possible, and yet when you're missing 4 of your 8 guys, let's go through who they're missing. They're missing Julius Randle, who was on track to make his 3rd All-NBA team in 4 years. He would have, like, if he kept up the same level of play, if he had played the requisite 65 games, and the Knicks with him, presumably, unless there was some butterfly effect where Jalen Brunson would have gotten hurt if Randle was playing, the Knicks would have been a clear-cut second seed in the Eastern Conference. Julius Randle was going to make his 3rd All-NBA in 4 years. So the 3rd time in 4 years, he was going to be considered one of the top 15 regular season players in all of basketball. They're without that guy. Generally, when a team loses an All-NBA player, that is a death knell. There are maybe 5 teams in the NBA that can lose an All-NBA player and still just even get out of the first round. And obviously there are exceptions, like if the Celtics had and they were playing the depleted Heat, sure. But generally, that is a death sentence for even getting out of the first round. Was not for the Knicks. You lose Bojan Bogdanovic, who I mean, think about what Bogey would be bringing to this team right now. If he were playing short, there would be defensive issues with him playing big minutes. Like if he was out there for 40 minutes a game, I think fatigue would catch up to him in some ways. You would have an off shooting night that might tank you. He'd probably be putting up, I don't know, against this Pacers team, I'd say something like 22 points per game, and probably doing so pretty darn efficiently for the Knicks. So you're without that. Mitchell Robinson for a team that desperately needs defense, for a team that all of a sudden cannot rebound the basketball anymore. I know you look at the final numbers, you see the Knicks got 16 offensive rebounds in this game. The Pacers only got 9. The Knicks only lost the rebounding battle overall by 9. That was not indicative of what I was watching early in this game, where the Knicks were just wiped. I mean, Josh Hart was doing nothing as a rebounder. He finished somehow in 24 minutes, only finished with 3 rebounds, and not finished with an offensive rebound. He said after the game, he had nothing today. Isaiah Hartenstein is almost more concerning to me, for a player whose success as a Knick has been defined by his relentless energy, his pursuit of the basketball, his toughness, his grittiness could be could be the right term. There is like, I almost want to say the word like growl. Like there is a constant growl to his game. Like he is kind of the ultimate, along with Josh Hart, obviously, junkyard player in this team. One of the ultimate ones in the league. Like he plays mean, he plays angry, like every single night at the center position, excluding the period where he was dealing with that Achilles injury that he is probably still dealing with. But in the period immediately after that Achilles injury, like the Knicks always had a toughness advantage with Isaiah Hartenstein in the game. And it just felt like, I mean, the game-winning three in game 2 against Philadelphia, where he beat 4 different Sixers to the basketball and somehow passed it out while 4 guys surrounded him and falling to the ground. Like that epitomized what you expect to get on a night-to-night basis at this point from Isaiah Hartenstein. And even before he injured his left shoulder, and apparently, according to him, possibly pinched a nerve in it, that was absent from his game. And that is where you desperately miss a healthy version of Mitchell Robinson, who could be even under the premise that he'd have to be guarding Miles Turner for a lot of this game. And I think the Knicks would have an adjustment there where they could, as Frank Barrett on Twitter, I know real name Jeff of the Hot Hand Theory podcast suggested, like if you wanted to put Josh Hart and Miles Turner, like I'd feel a lot better about that if you could say, all right, and then Mitchell Robinson is going to guard Pascal Siakam, and you could slot him at the rim, and you'd have that rim protection, you'd have that flexibility, and you'd have the best offensive rebounder in basketball, who Indiana, as generally a terrible defensive rebounding team, just does not have an answer for. And there is, and that is what I was looking at, right? Like DJ Zulo used the phrase like critical mass on this podcast. Like, what are the Knicks going to reach a critical mass where we just, or I looked at it as like a tipping point where you just do not have enough anymore. And losing Mitch and not having a healthy version of him to begin with, like, is also a key component of that. Julius Randle, who's an exceptionally good offensive rebounder when he's healthy, is also a key component of that. And I think what I'm getting at is like when you lose so much that your identity as a team is just eroded to the point that you can no longer win with that identity. And the identity of this Knicks is dominating the glass, I think, first and foremost. And they somehow, some way, despite not having a healthy version of Mitch, despite Randall not touching the court for a second against the Sixers, they still had enough in that capacity to control the game on the glass for 5 of the 6 games in that series, maybe 4.5 of the 6 games in that series. And against Indiana, who was one of the worst rebounding teams in basketball in the regular season, the Knicks for the second straight game get bullied on the glass. And last game, they had their moments. They in the fourth quarter, like, were finding ways to get second possession. There were no such moments in this one where the Knicks just controlled the game because they controlled possession of the basketball. And sometimes it's that simple. And then OG Anunoby obviously is the final straw in that equation. Someone who is big enough to guard Pascal Siakam and, yes, help on the glass on both ends of the floor and provide another strong, long, physical presence that the Pacers have to worry about crashing on offense, and is able to box out of Siakam, is able to battle with a Turner on the defensive end. With him gone too, you are forced to make a Sophie's choice if you're Tom Thibodeau, and that is to have Precious Achiuwa and totally tank spacing on a team where your star guard, who is already being asked for his entire Knicks career to create against packed-in defenses. Let's just throw another defender in that mix who just doesn't have to worry about a Precious Achiuwa sitting in the corner and can just blatantly double-team Jalen Brunson on a bum foot. That's no good. Deuce McBride, that lineup all season long, Brunson, Deuce, Devo, Hart, Hartenstein, was dominant. They were exceptionally good. They had one of the better net ratings in the league when the Knicks suffered that string of injuries where Randall and Anunoby went out in quick succession, and Mitchell Robinson was already out. That lineup was exceptional. They don't have the juice to function because that lineup is completely reliant on playing full throttle. And with everything that has happened, with all the minutes put on this team in the regular season, there was not enough there anymore to play full throttle, and that sucks. But it is our reality at this point. And they're going to have to find it. And it's why game 3 in retrospect, and why I was a little bit more hesitant than Alex was on the last podcast to wipe game 3 off the board and say like, hey, you know what? Indiana was back home. They were due to get one. The Knicks played great. Like this is totally replicable. And is that even a word? I'm not sure. And instead it really was not repeatable. I think that's the word I was looking for. Because Dante DiVincenzo shot out of his mind and had like flames shooting out of his eyes. I think Jalen Brunson was able to gut it out in a way that he wasn't in this game. And Josh Hart at some point, like you could see the car puttering. You could see like the smoke coming out the end. Like the car finally died. And maybe playing 24 minutes in this one is enough. And the MSG crowd is enough that it's back online in game 6. But if that energy is not there from Hart, if it's not there from everyone on this team, like it's a faulty premise to even talk about adjustments, because none of them really matter unless this team can play at full throttle. And it is going to be a heck of a challenge because they have every right to not play at full strength. Like JJ Redick was saying throughout the second half, and you put it more eloquently than I've been, but it's exactly what I've been trying to get at. Like, as much as this team is pure, unadulterated basketball madness and is tough in a way that is genuinely rare and genuinely special, like the rules of biochem still apply. Like at the rules of physics still apply. At a certain point, like energy is finite, and you play 1,000,000 minutes. You're asked to not just play 45 minutes a game, but 45 grueling minutes where you are supposed to do everything. And you just lose, again, one too many guys. The player in OG Anunoby, who is there to put out fires, and he can't do it anymore. And your rim protection in Isaiah Hartenstein is playing at less than 100% and is dragged away from the rim in Miles Turner. And you don't have an Anunoby to sprint from the corner to the rim to contest shots at the basket. All of a sudden, it all falls apart. And we'll talk more about that in just a sec on Locked On Knicks. But first, we wanted to tell you about our good friends over at FanDuel. It's winner take all time in the NBA and NHL, and FanDuel gives you a shot to bring home a big win of your own. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $150 to bet on spreads, money line, player props, and more. So right now, the Knicks and Pacers have even odds to win this series. So you can look at this in two ways, and I can't tell you you're crazy either way. You could say, like, this is the New York Knicks we're talking about. They respond. They don't lose to teams that they should beat. You could flip it the other way and say this team is dead in the water. It's very, very obvious that Indiana is going to win 2 of the final 3 games in this series, or maybe just 2 in a row and end it in 6. Whichever way you would lean, I won't reveal which way I'm going to lean. You can visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and make every playoff shot count. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, guys, we are not going to belabor it. We're going to wrap things up here on Locked On Knicks. I wanted to just talk some of the basic defensive breakdowns in this one and what the Knicks can do to fix them, because this was as much mental errors as physical errors, which I hope I've done a good job emphasizing on this podcast. Like, we've seen an extraordinary amount of mental errors from the Knicks. That like when like everyone like keeps throwing out there like, man, like, obviously last night wasn't, but before last night's game or last afternoon's game, like how is this close? Like how is this yet another close game? Like give me a break. Like, just play a normal basketball game where you win by 10. It's because the Knicks have had a number of games that they normally would with sufficient depth win by 10, 12, 14 points, but they tend to fall apart down the stretch of these games, or even earlier in games where they have moments where they would otherwise be able to separate, and they just do not have the consistency in terms of their decision-making to be able to do it. Like an 8-second violation here, a throwaway on an inbound there, a 5-second violation here, like a turnover on a dumb throwaway here. And now, like, I think for the most part, that focus has not creeped in to their defense. It's Tom Thibodeau's. It reminds me of the SpongeBob episode where it becomes the ultimate fry cook, but in the process forgets his own name. And Tom Thibodeau's been saying, all right, if you have 40% of your normal like basketball acuity left, devote it all to defense, and like Jalen Brunson on auto mode is going to fuel us to great offense. And it feels like the fire's been set in the brain, and like finally the Jenga stack crumbled, and they didn't have enough defensively in this game. It looked so bad right from the get-go. A combination of heavy legs, and as I noted at the end of the last segment, Isaiah Hartenstein being pulled away from the rim by Miles Turner, who's just been scalding hot the last 3 or 4 games of this series. Give him credit, like he is shooting the crap out of the basketball. And when that's happening, you were reliant on an OG Anunoby to provide some secondary rim protection. Because he was out, I think that is why, despite the fact that it tanks the Knicks offense sometimes, not in the regular season, but recently, Tibbs put Precious Achiuwa out there, who after I think, if I'm remembering correctly, a 3-block performance in game 3, he did not have a single block in this one in 24 minutes, 6 points, 6 rebounds, a generally gross effort from Precious Achiuwa, like did not provide that secondary rim protection that the Knicks just need to survive. And in turn, it was a feast for Indiana. But I don't want to put the Knicks guards and the Nova core off the hook, because they suck too. Like total inability to force TJ McConnell to his left, or unwillingness to try. The one time they finally did it, he actually blew a wide open layup after getting right to his left. Just a ton of issues matching up in transition. Every time Indiana pushed the basketball, it felt like 2 or 3 guys were swarming to the ball, typically to Tyrese Halliburton, and his life couldn't have been easier in terms of just moving the ball to the next guy, and just creating a wide open shot. The Pacers, this was a Fred Katz stat, scored 1.85 points in transition. That is essentially what a team would score in an open gym with no defense, or like on a 5-on-3 like type of drill where you just, or 3-on-2 or 3-on-1 type drill where you're just practicing like desperation time transition defense. That could not have been much worse. The Knicks consistently helped one pass away off good shooters, which I understand it's tough not to do, because Indiana will put lineups out there with 5 shooters on the floor. But the help and recovery was just not there. There was no helping the helper, and consistently, you would just see like Jalen Brunson, like throwing a blatant double on Tyrese Halliburton, never recover to his guy, which was Andrew Nembhard, and he would be expecting someone like Pascal Siakam to recognize what he was doing. Not Pascal Siakam, Precious Achiuwa, to recognize what he was doing and then rotate over to the top of the key, get a swat. And that was just too much to ask. But it wasn't just him. Precious was doing the same thing. Like Hart wasn't getting deep enough when Obi was rolling to the rim. Indiana has been fond of running a Spain pick and roll very often in the series. It's one of their pet sets come into this series, and the Knicks in the regular season were not very good at covering it. They did a decent enough job early in the series. That has fallen apart. That is basically a situation where you run what would be a normal like pick and roll or pick and pop, but you are having a third player come into the action and screen for the screener, and the third player can pop, the screener can roll. Really tough for a defense to guard, and the Knicks are all out of sorts right now, so they are leaving people wide open. Like when Indiana ran in the second half, Precious was totally lost. Nembhard got a wide open 3 off it. Precious helping one pass away from Miles Turner. A lot of times it was Precious at fault, but it was everyone. Low energy, low focus, low execution. In terms of adjustments, I mentioned I've seen a lot of people throw hard on Turner out there. I kind of like that. I think it's a fun wrinkle. And as Jeff pointed out on Twitter, again, you can follow him. He's Frank Barrett on Twitter. The idea of Indiana just having to divert their offense to go through Miles Turner, even if it's effective, is appealing. Like you just have to throw like a wrench in their gears, do anything, even if it's weird, even if it's illogical, to take them out of some kind of rhythm. And you have to find some way to get Isaiah Hartenstein closer to the rim. There are no perfect solutions for the Knicks at this point with their personnel, with all their injuries, with their level of energy right now. You just have to try something, because if not, the Knicks are not going to have enough to win this series. I do think we get a very different team in Game 5 on their home floor. Couple days to rest. Obviously did not have to play big minutes in this one. I think they come out like their season is on the line, because it ultimately is. And we're going to see very quickly in this game, like their season might have been lost in Game 3. You win that one. I think a very similar scenario would have played out in Game 4, where the Knicks would have gotten blown out and they would put everything to Game 5. And if it was necessary, they would have put everything into Game 7. And you could look at it like the Knicks avoided any risk of becoming the first team to blow a 3-0 lead. So that's nice. They really should have won game 3. And it's a shame that they didn't. And I have a sneaking suspicion we're going to look back on that as the moment that this series was lost. But you know what? Every time you doubt this Knicks team, you think there's no way they can get it done. They pull a rabbit out of the hat. Is there one more rabbit? We're going to find out in 2 days. Again, I'm going to be back with XJ. We're going to be maybe take some mailbag questions and talk a little bit more in depth about some potential adjustments the Knicks can make. That'll be in your feeds tomorrow. But until then, be good, and we'll talk to you very, very soon on Locked On Knicks.